Hello everyone. Today I'll be delivering informative speech about Napoleon Bonaparte. He was a French military and political leader who participated in French Revolution and after that became leader of France. I will be trying to talk about some important events in his life. He was firstly let's look at his childhood. He was born in 1769 in Corsica, which is island next to the France. He went to military school in France. And while there, he was apart from his family, and he spent much of his time alone. And he loved reading about great conquerors of the history. When he graduated at the age of 16, he was made second lieutenant in an artillery regiment. You might think that that's pretty impressive for a 16-year-old, but he was a very ambitious person and was not just happy with being a junior officer. He wanted to rise through the ranks. But at that time, that was a little bit too difficult because at that French society, the positions were handed out based on the nobility of the people, but not the talent. But if you look at his rise, this happened like after the after he graduated, the revolution came, French Revolution. So this was a perfect chance for him to rise through the ranks and get more popular. So he began fighting to defend the revolution. He put down a counter-revolution and got promoted. He put down an uprising in Paris against revolution and got promoted. As he became more and more popular, he was given also his army, and this was a stunning success for a young man like Napoleon. Now I will be trying to look at the wars he participated in. War of the First Coalition. This war took place started in 1792, and at that time, almost all the monarchies around Europe declared war on France, and basically all of the Europe declared war on France, were at war with the France, and France planned to a three-way attack from different fronts to take out the Austria. There were two huge armies in the north and Napoleon's army in the south. So this was Napoleon's first chance to lead the army, and this was his chance to prove himself. And of course, he proved himself. Even though the army that he was given were demoralized, were lacking equipment and underpaid, Napoleon encouraged them with his inspirational speeches. While the main armies, the northern armies, were being held back, Napoleon's armies made like staggering progress. Actually, it was the main armies were supposed to be the main show, but Napoleon's made his attack the main part of the offensive. At the famous Battle of Lodi, he was in the front line aiming artillery himself next to his soldiers, and gained a total respect of them. When he was going through Italy, he sent the riches back to France and helped France stabilize its economy. When he was going to Vienna, Austrians were forced to make a peace, and Napoleon himself dictated the peace terms. And while doing all of this, he was only 28. So after this, when he got back to France, he was hailed as a hero. In the following stage, he participated in a coup against the unpopular government, and a new government was formed. And Napoleon was the first consul of the new government. And basically, by the next few years, he got even more power and indeed became a dictator of the France. And all of this by just the age of 30. Moving on to the War of Second Coalition. In 1799, the War of Second Coalition began. This time, Russia was also against France. And I would like to point out to the fact when Napoleon's army crossed the Alps, which is legendary. There is a picture painting of him, which is quite popular, as he is on the horse riding his army through the Alps. But actually, that's not the reality, and he was passing the Alps on a mule. But of course, that was not put into the painting because it's not as cool as riding on a horse. And during this war, French again moved to the Vienna, so Austrians again stood for peace. So the Second Coalition War ended as French victory, and the United Kingdom remained in the war, but also peace treaty was signed with them in 1802, and finally France was at peace. So during that time of peace, Napoleon did a lot of reforms and stabilized the country. He ended the chaos that revolution caused and created a stable country and become generally popular with the people. In 1804, the vote was held, and he got the status of emperor. He became an emperor. But just before that, in 1803, the Third Coalition War began, and like it was the best war of Napoleon. He presented his skills in the best possible way. It was his masterpiece, we could say. And again, this time for the third time, Austrians were forced to make peace with France as the war ended in 1806. But only Austria took out of the war, and UK, Russia, and Sweden still remained in the war with France. Spain, Napoleon during this time were planning the invasion of United Kingdom, but of course United Kingdom has its navy, which is like best and which was best in the world. So, but France didn't. So Napoleon was planning to use the Spanish fleet and was hoping that if they combined fleet of the both countries, maybe they could get superiority over British and invade UK, but that was not possible as Spanish fleet was destroyed by the Brits. Moving on to the Fourth Coalition, in October 1806, Prussia also joined the coalition, so the War of the Fourth Coalition began. Prussians were destroyed. Prussia's forces would destroy French in just a month, but after this, French forces, Napoleon's forces, moved towards the Russian border. But around this time, the winter came, so both sides had to wait till the end of the winter for the offensive. And after the winter, the war continued, and which resulted in the victory for Napoleon. After this, Russians sued for peace, and during the negotiations, interestingly enough, Napoleon and Alexander, the Russian emperor, got along pretty well. This could be a bit weird, as they were fighting for like previous 4 years, but during the negotiations process, they become like best friends of each other. So after this, Russia became France's ally, Napoleon's ally. Moving on to the War of the Fifth Coalition, it began in 1806. Austrians again declared war on France and got destroyed in just 4 months. After this war, Napoleon married with Austria's king's daughter, because he needed a male heir to continue his heritage, and in this way, at the result of this, Austria also became France's ally, and basically France controlled whole of Europe. But after this, invasion of Russia began, but I cannot get into details of this, the reasons why Napoleon declared war on Russia. During this war, Russians used an interesting tactic in this war. Like basically, whenever Napoleon moved its troops to the Russian troops, the war, Russians just ran away. They just retreated and burned the cities while doing so that French could not get supply. So this which would like slow them down, so they wouldn't be able to catch the Russians. In this way, like Napoleon followed, run through the Russian troops till the Moscow, and he expected that they would like finally turn around and fight with them at Moscow, and they wouldn't give up like important city like Moscow without a fight, which of course they did. They turned around and they fought with Napoleon, even though they lost and basically left the Moscow, burned it to the ground and left it. Napoleon expected that Alexander would surrender and sent a letter to asking him to surrender, but he didn't. Basically, Alexander didn't answer to his request to the so the Napoleon waited for answer in for 1 month, and during which for during this month, first snow of the winter came. So basically, Napoleon's army was stuck in the middle of the Russia, and during the winter, and during which like which was difficult to find food and supply. So they and when this happened, Napoleon understood the catastrophe that was standing in front of him, and they had to retreat. They tried to get out of the Russia, but in the end he abandoned his men and just got back to the France. And it was estimated that almost 600,000 men were in the invasion of Russia, but only less than 100,000 returned, which was catastrophe and basically destruction of Napoleon's army. After this War of Six coalition began, as the countries tried to take advantage of France's weakness, and because the army was destroyed, coalition got to the Paris, and it was basically over. Napoleon was sent to the island of Elba for the exile, and interestingly, funnily enough, he was allowed to remain the emperor, but of Elba, which is just a small island next to the Italy. When he learned about this, he drank the poison to kill himself, but it had gone out of date, so he couldn't kill himself. But after this, at Elba, he wasn't guarded by any like troops, so he could just basically he just jumped on a ship and went back to France to take it over. He moved to the Paris. The king that was put of the charge of the France sent troops, but the troops just joined the Napoleon, as most of them were consisted of Napoleon's old soldiers who knew him, who had sympathy for him. So in the end, the king just ran away, and Napoleon took over the France again, funnily enough. And however, after this coalition declared war, but they didn't declare war on France. They declared war on Napoleon, which is like interesting because like not the huge empires doesn't just declare war on you. This doesn't happen very often in the history. And of course, because the France didn't have an organized army, they just lost the war again. And this time Napoleon was sent to the Saint Helena Island, and there was no way that he could escape from such island. But just to be sure, he was guarded by 2,000 soldiers in an island, and all the time, like 24 hours a day, two ships were circling around the island. Napoleon died at the age of 51 in 1840. His remains were moved to the Paris, where they now rest under the Dome of Les Invalides. And to conclude, I would like to say that this is the life of a man from a humble family who had huge ambition and determination. He was determined to mark his name into the history, and he did. The revolution of France spread the modern unity and nationalism in Europe. He changed military tactics of the warfare, with his incredible intelligence in tactics, and he was the last political and leader and also the greatest military general that the world had ever seen. So that was it. I hope you enjoyed listening to me. Thank you for watching. Peace out and bye bye.